So now let's take a look at the three branches of government, right? Executive branch, the legislative branch, judicial branch. This is at all three levels. So executive branch, president, governor, mayor. Legislative branch, Congress, and state legislature, and a city council, right? That's often the case. Judicial, Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, and then we have local courts, all kinds of local and county courts and things like that, right? So each of these branches is also divided among the different levels within the federal system, okay? Federal, state, and local, right? The founders, the writers of the Constitution, Madison, Hamilton, and Jay, they knew that the country needed different people to do different things so that all the power wouldn't be in one group or one person or one branch, right? They wanted different people to write the laws, different people to enforce the laws, different people to settle disputes among states. So we have three branches, all right? Executive branch enforces laws. Enforces laws. Does that through agency. So that's the president, right? It is the largest branch, okay, the office of the president, okay? And under the executive branch, there's the FBI and the USDA and the CIA and there's all kinds of agencies, right? The ATF, and there's any in the IRS. Laws are enforced through agencies, okay? Through agencies. That's how they're enforced. Legislative branch creates laws. So the president can influence the creation of a law, but the president can't write a law, right? Laws have to be written by Congress. They have to be passed by Congress, right? And all right, next one, judicial branch. So it was initially outlined in the Constitution, the Supreme Court, the judicial branch, well, the Supreme Court, as solving disputes between and among states. So this is resolving disputes among states. It wasn't till later on, and we're going to take a look at this later, a much more detailed look at this later, that the Supreme Court gave itself essentially the power to declare laws or executive actions unconstitutional. Right? That was not initially in the Constitution. That was a power that developed later on. Right? So three branches of government. We also need to look at checks and balances. Right? So if they do different things, how do you keep one branch from gaining too much power? Well, you have checks from one branch to another, and that balances power, kind of, right? Now, it's not a perfect system, of course, but that's how it works. So how do these checks and balances work? So let's say that Congress, I'll put a little star here, a little asterisk there, passes a law. Well, the president must sign or veto that law. So Congress passes the law, the president must sign or veto. The veto is a check, right, on Congress. Well, so that veto can get sent back to Congress, but Congress can override, if there's enough support, see if I spelled override correctly, can override a veto. Right? If there are enough votes in Congress, if there's enough support, it can override the veto. Okay? So that is a check and a balance here in between the legislative branch and the executive branch. Right? But there's also something that the Supreme Court can do. And I'll just draw our kind of line this way. Can declare laws unconstitutional or pieces of a law. So that's a check from the judicial branch, right? On your handout for this section, you're going to see a triangle, and it's got a bunch of little things written on there and arrows going in multiple directions, and that gives you more information about checks and balances and how this process works, okay? Judicial branch can also declare executive actions. Executive actions unconstitutional. Takes a while to write this. Unconstitutional, okay? It gets a little confusing. We're seeing a lot of arrows back and forth, but that's the way it works, okay? Hopefully this will make sense. Maybe go back and listen to it again. I'm not sure. Maybe the handout will help, okay? Well, let's think of something else. How can the president influence the court? Well, the president, think of another process here, appoints judges or justices if we're talking about the Supreme Court. But the Senate must advise, it's called advise and consent. And that's, check that away. Right? Well, the court, Congress can impeach judges. Not just because they don't like them, but they have to be doing something wrong, breaking the law somehow or something like that, right? Well, Congress can also impeach a president. Impeach the president, okay? So more checks, more balances. Another one is that the president negotiates treaties. Well, Congress must ratify, the Senate does, treaties. So there's lots of checks, and we can go on and on. There's a lot of different kinds of checks and balances. You will need to know, you should know, you ought to know some of these different examples, right? How this works. So you want to know how government is divided, what each branch is responsible for. Okay, I try to lay it out in very simple terms for you, and you should know how. At least some of the basic ways with some examples, right? I want you to know some of the examples of how this system of checks and balances works, okay? I don't know if you're going to get asked about that on the test, but you might. It's a good thing to know, especially if you're going to teach social studies down the road. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. And our next topic in this is how does this declaring actions and laws unconstitutional, right? It's a big check, it's a big balance here, it's a big part of this checks and balances. How did that come about? Where did that come from? How did the court decide to, or how did it go about giving itself that power? And that's going to be in the next video.